Let's take out our hollow form and make sure that we have our good squishy clay in a bag so it doesn't dry out while we're working. Let's take a look at our hollow form from yesterday. You may find that there's divots and little dings from the bag. You can wipe those out, but do it carefully. The surface of your hollow form is probably damp and you're going to get these streaks, and then clay will go onto your fingers. So clean off your fingers every now and then just keep wiping and smoothing out the surface of your form. But then you're going to need to set it aside so that it can firm up and dry out. Warning, I worked on making all of my additive parts while my form sat out, so you'll see them in the first section before even seeing them created. I'm not a time traveler, just efficient. Okay, now that our hollow form sat out for just a little while so it was nice and firm without getting streaky when I rubbed it, it's time to carve. This is what not to do. You don't want to hold the pin tool like a pencil and write and scratch. You're just slicing and making a hot mess. So let's try again. You can hold it at an angle and then glide and drag the tool so that when you carve, you're actually making a nicer mark. You could clean up those carvings with a smoothing tool that has a rubber tip so that you have a wider carving. It's more noticeable. As you carve, you may see clay kind of push up over an edge and look rough. That can be sharp later, so take a brush and just smooth them out. Those little edges are actually called burrs. Whatever you carve onto your hollow form can be themed based around your circle of trust and your images that you chose, or you could simply just carve in neat textures. Here I'm using a loop tool, so I'm kind of using it and pushing in and then pulling up, and I'm turning it so that I can make some kind of a flower design. Now make sure that you're not carving too deeply in your hollow form. Remember, it is hollow, so you don't want to go all the way through or make weak spots. So pay attention to how thick you're carving. You can use a tool to kind of dab in and even scribe in and carve in some of the veins of a petal. You could use them to do any kind of patterns or designs that you wish. How deep you carve will kind of make it have a deeper texture, obviously, a lot more value. And if you carve very lightly, then it's going to have a very faint texture. Another method for incorporating subtractive texture is by pressing, and basically it's stamping, but you're using tools that you already have. So you can use any of the tools in a repeated fashion, just keep repeat, press. You're not really taking away material, but you are being resourceful by pressing into the firm yet moldable clay so that you can get all these different textures. You don't have to use all of these textures. Anything that fits the theme of your pot or the textures that you want to create is up to you. This is just me showing you all of the possibilities. For example, if you look around the house, you will probably find some really cool textures, like the ends of a marker cap. If you can twist and press and experiment, you can get some really cool textures. Those could become bubbles. This marker, when pressed in, it actually looks like a screw. That's just a popsicle stick. So I could just take this and just keep pressing and get fish scale design. Here I have the top of a Christmas ornament. It's the part that holds the string, and then I just spread it out and pressed it for the really cool pattern. Here I also have some varying beads from a kit that I had for my kids, and I hot glued them to a tortilla stump, a stick, a dowel, chopstick, anything that you have to make it easier to use. But you can press anything that you find around a house, buttons, you name it. Using your extra clay, you're going to make the items that you put on your Circle of Trust worksheet. I suggest that you find a reference photo. There's a poppy for my mother, so I'm going to work on that. For this technique, I'm going to use something called pinching. So you're just going to very gently pinch out. You know this already from making the pinch pot. Make sure that you don't go too fast, otherwise it'll crack. And you can also use a little touch of water, just tiny bit, to smooth out any edges and any cracks that you have. Use your reference photo to figure out if your object needs to be made in parts. So for this, I'm going to make it in parts. I'm going to make petals. I'm making the petals with a little bit thicker of a bottom so that I have space to slip and score when I go to assemble my parts. Another method for creating your three-dimensional elements to add to your jar is coiling. So you don't want to go all crazy and fast. There is a technique to make a good coil. First, make sure the clay is moist, and then spread your fingertips or your hands in an outward motion as you rock back and forth. By doing that, you're going to get a nice, even coil that's flexible and ready for you to create. Here are some ideas. Now, don't hate me, but you do know this process. So you can take your coils and actually create a weaving out of them. The trick is to not just kind of put down the clay and expect it all to fall into place like yarn. You have to convince it. You have to kind of stretch it over, smooth it out, and manipulate it so it doesn't crack and it doesn't fall apart. After you've created a little weaving, you can even take some coils, slip and score them around the edge so that you strengthen your little piece of fabric, and then that way it can be lifted and then added to your pot. Some of you may have the benefit here of already learning how to braid. Again, you can't just braid and think it's like hair. You have to convince it. First, I suggest you brush it down with some water, and then piece by piece you have to kind of curve it around, give it a little pat, 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 and convince it to follow a braid pattern. So curve it around, pat, and then that way you also have a strong piece. By adding water, you are ensuring that it is in fact connecting and it's not just going to fall apart. Not bad. I think this actually might work out well as my handle later. Nice. Another, but certainly not the last idea you could do with coils is just to create a twist. Another method you could use is to just create cookie cutouts. When you flatten clay, don't just use your palms. As you see, it could leave veins and texture that you may not want. Find something in the house. I just have a big Sharpie here that you can use to roll it out. After you've rolled it out, you can use any of the cutting tools to slide the tool and to cut out any shape that you want. As you're creating, you may want to lay out some of your pieces on your pot and take a look and see how they will plan out. You also want to make sure that anything that is larger, that you keep it from drying out so that it is still flexible to shape around your pot. You don't want it to dry out and then not be able to follow the form. Now you know the drill to attach clay to clay. First, let's figure out where we want to put this twisty thing. And now I'm going to score and add some water. So I'm going to brush water where it's going to go first, and then brush water on my twist. And scoring a twist is kind of hard, so I'm just going to score on my form, and then I'm going to gently attach the twist. Let's attach my poppy flower for my mom. There, all attached and cleaned up, ready to go. Some other little details you can add that don't really need scoring, just a little water and pressure. You can make little tiny spheres and then press them on. Makes it look like beads. So here we are. I've added a few more elements to this jar. Of course, I would expect you to have more on here and have it fit in with the theme of the project. A lot of this was me just showing you all the cool things that you could do. Every now and then, check the balance of your project. You may find that you added something heavy on one side or it lost its footing. So pat on that bottom and smooth it out so it doesn't wobble. After you've done most of your subtractive and additive features, you can start to plan out where your lid should be. You're going to use your pen tool to lightly scratch in a wavy line that doesn't interfere with anything too big. Notice I went around my poppy, but I did go through my twist. Then you're going to take a pin tool or a blade tool and then slice through at an angle. It has to be a 45-degree angle pointing down. Don't try to go all the way through in one shot. You may have to go halfway through and then back again through, but make sure you always keep that 45-degree angle pointing down and trace the line that you made until you cut your lid totally off to see a hot mess. So now what we're going to do, we need to clean up that seam from way back when we attached our pinch pots, smooth it out. Next, you need to take care of those edges from the cut. We might have some chunks to take off and some burrs to take care of. Be careful not to really change the clay or push it too hard. You can go ahead and use a paintbrush to smooth out those edges without changing the form That way your lid matches up with your pot without any gaping holes. We want this to be a seamless design. One final detail is the handle for your lid. Remember that braid that I made? I'm going to make sure that I really slip and score this well so it doesn't come off. When you're testing out to see if your handle is comfortable, don't use the handle until your clay piece is dried out. Just hold it from the side. Now I know that I made this jar in just over 20 minutes, but that is not how long it is actually going to take you. This is going to take you a few days. So at the end of every day, make sure that you put all of your good clay in a bag and give it a little water, and that you put all of your made pieces into a bag so that they do not dry out before you attach them. Now from start to finish, you want to make sure that you wrap your project every day in its own bag. That way it doesn't get too wet from the other clay, but it also doesn't dry out, making it impossible for you to keep adding your details. Use any shopping bag to wrap your project loosely so that it can slowly dry out.